Good morning, my name is Rachelle Rivera, and I'll be discussing the Enlightenment period, also known as the Age of Reason. It spanned from the mid-17th century to the culmination in the French Revolution. Before getting into the topic of the Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant was a big aspect of it. He was a lifelong resident of Prussia till the age of 79 and was born into an artisan family of modest means. Now his parents were pietists and he went to the school for pietists from ages 8 through 15. However, he strongly reacted against the forced soul searching that school had them go through. So he sought refuge in his Latin class. Now, since maturing, he put emphasis on reason and autonomy rather than emotion and dependence on either authority or grace, which reflected his youthful reaction against pietism. And later on, you'll see how that connects to the Enlightenment, but for now, we're just going to talk about him. But although he loathed it, he respected and admired his parents, especially his mother. Now, his parents did influence through pietism, but not as much as their artisan values, which were hard work, honesty, cleanliness, and independence. We're going to specifically look at Immanuel Kant's essay, What is Enlightenment? During that period, the rise of science and rationalism was sweeping aside traditional authority in the churches as systems to explain the world they were in. It was also seen as a revolutionary movement of intellectual ideas characterized by political and philosophical concepts of liberty and equality for all human beings. Moving on, we're going to be talking about the principles and characteristics of the Enlightenment era, which include aspects in attitudes, social rejection, and aesthetic. Starting from the top, they wanted rationality, logic, and consistency. And they would take technology over wilderness and evidence over faith. They would have preference for civilized debate, like it all had to be intellectual, nothing should be forced. It's only if you feel like you want to debate. They rejected dogma, emotionalism, superstition, monarchy, traditional religion, etc. Their aesthetic was geometric and orderly repetition within patterns and a disdain for messiness and chaos. Here we can see the Holy Family in Egypt. It shares characteristics of symmetry, as you can see in the Greco-Roman architecture in the background, which is also something they appreciated during that era. And it had art imitating ideal nature. And I know I said that they prefer technology over wildlife, but they did like artifice over natural things. So that's basically what that's saying. And you could see people here, sharing supplies in a ideal nature kind of way. Did it start? Okay. This is Gatai's Somebody That I Used to Know featuring Kimbra. And you see a lot of rejection of emotionalism in the way they showcase the music. And there's a desire for geometric and orderly repetition, like before. It has those very sharp edges, nothing's too drastic or messy, and the video is quite balanced throughout the duration of it. Here we have a summary of Immanuel Kant's essay, What is Enlightenment? It emphasizes the value of intellectual freedom and argues that one must follow the dictates of law currently in place, but they should also exercise his or her judgment and reason in a public discourse to transform the laws to bring about a more just society. Okay, pause it. On the scene we're going to be working on or dramatizing, there's going to be a lot of intelligent debate, rejection of monarchy, and the desire for rationality and consistency. Before we begin the dramatization, what happens in it is Immanuel Kant explains what he thinks intelligent debate is and how that affects the authoritarian and lawful figures there are in the world at that time.
But I hear from all sides the cry, do not argue. The officer says, do not argue but drill. The tax official, do not argue but pay. The clergyman, do not argue but believe. Only one ruler in the world says, argue as much as you will, and about whatever you will, but obey. Everywhere there are restrictions on freedom, but what sort of restriction hinders enlightenment, and what sort does not hinder, but instead promotes it?
Did you say? Okay. I reply, the public use of one's reason must always be free, and it alone can bring about enlightenment among human beings. The private use of one's reason may, however, often be very narrowly restricted without this particularly hindering the progress of enlightenment. But by the public use of one's own reason, I understand that use which someone makes of it as a scholar before the entire public of the world of readers.